Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to tackle a topic that usually makes people reach for the skip button and go find a true crime show instead. We are talking about math.
I can already hear the collective groan through the headphones. I mean, it's math.
Right. But stick with us here because we aren't going to make you do long division in your head or, find the value of X. We are talking about something way more fundamental to your daily life. We're talking about risk assessment.
Exactly. It's really about your ability to look at a medical dosage chart or understand a mortgage rate, or even just looking at a retirement plan and actually knowing what you're looking at.
Yeah, numeracy is basically a literacy issue at this point. If you can't read the numbers, you really can't read the modern world.
And that brings us to the source we're looking at today. It's an extensive report from EAB titled Closing the Math Proficiency Gap. And the main headline isn't just the usual, math scores are down.
We all know they're down.
Right. The real headline here is that we might be fundamentally teaching math in a way that fights against human biology.
Which is just a massive claim. But when you look at the cognitive science they lay out in this report, it's really hard to argue with. It's like we're trying to run high-end gaming software on a computer from 1995. The hardware, meaning the human brain, just isn't being used the way it was designed to be used.
And the stakes are incredibly high. The report opens with this startling statistic that really anchors the whole discussion. It says 93% of students are cognitively capable of learning math.
That number is wild. 93%.
Stops you in your tracks, right? Because by 8th grade, nearly 61% of students are not proficient.
Yeah.
So we have this massive gap between 93% capability and actual proficiency.
We're losing more than half the room. And that completely blows up the whole myth of, oh, some people just aren't math people. Biologically, that's almost entirely false.
So let's look at the current crisis. And I use the word crisis carefully because everything is a crisis nowadays, but the trend lines here are genuinely terrifying.
They really are. And I think we have to address the elephant in the room right up front. When people hear math scores are dropping, the immediate reaction is to blame one specific event.
The pandemic. Everybody blames Zoom school and the school closures.
Exactly. We assume the virus just broke the education system. And sure, the EAB report notes that scores did drop about 8 points during COVID. Nobody's denying that disruption happened.
But the report says, not so fast. If you zoom out and look at the NAEP scores, that's the National Assessment of Educational Progress math scores, had already dropped by 13 points between 2013 and 2019.
That was the first big wait a minute moment for me reading this. The decline was actually steeper before the virus ever existed.
Precisely. The rot is structural. The pandemic accelerated it, obviously, but the car was already driving off the cliff way before 2020. And the data shows the top performers are actually staying relatively stable. It's the below basic group that is just exploding in size.
And we can't just write this off as a poverty issue either, can we? That's another really comfortable myth people lean on, that this is only happening in underfunded districts.
The data shatters that one too. We are seeing significant drops in higher income districts across the board. The gap is widening everywhere.
And what about screens? Because that's the other big scapegoat. Kids are on their phones too much. They have TikTok brains, so they can't focus on math.
The report addresses that directly. Adolescent screen time is up about 54% worldwide, so it's a global phenomenon. But the United States achievement gap in math is growing the fastest. So if it was just screen time, we'd see identical massive drops everywhere globally, but the U.S. drop is distinct.
So if it's not the pandemic, and it's not just poverty, and it's not just screen time, what is actually going on? The report points the finger at something called the math wars.
Which sounds like a terrible action movie.
It really does. But it's this decades-old philosophical battle in education. And honestly, it is as heated as any political debate. In one corner, you have the teacher-led camp.
Right, which is explicit instruction. This is probably how you and I learned. The teacher stands at the board, show you the formula, you memorize it, and you drill it. The classic I do, we do, you do model.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the other corner, you have the student-led camp. This focuses on inquiry and discovery learning. The philosophy is that students should figure out the patterns themselves to build a deep conceptual understanding.
They call it productive struggle. The argument is that if a teacher just hands you the answer, you don't really internalize it. You have to discover it.
And usually, this debate is presented to people as a binary choice. You're either doing drill and kill rote memorization or you're doing fluffy discovery math. But the EAB report says they're both wrong.
Well, it actually says they are both right. The problem is that they are being used at the completely wrong times. It's not a philosophical choice at all. It's a timing issue.
Break that down a bit more because I think this is crucial.
Think about it like this. If I drop you into the cockpit of a 747 and I say, okay, figure out all these buttons so you really understand the aerodynamics of flight.
We all die. I am crashing that plane immediately.
Exactly. Discovery learning is terrible for novices. When you are learning a brand new skill, your brain is just scrambling to identify the basic parts. You need a model. You need explicit teacher-led instruction to show you the map.
But if I already know how to fly the plane and you want me to learn how to handle a severe storm,
Then I want you to struggle a bit. I want you to use inquiry. Student-led learning is incredibly effective for mastered skills because it builds persistence and flexibility. The tragedy here is that our schools are getting the order reversed.
we're asking kids to discover multiplication before they even understand what grouping numbers actually means.
They're the flip side. We're drilling them on concepts they already know perfectly, which just kills their engagement. We're using the wrong tool at the wrong stage of the learning process.
And this naturally leads into the cognitive science section of the report. This part honestly explains why my brain just shuts down when I try to calculate a tip at a restaurant while someone is talking to me. It all comes down to cognitive load theory.
This is the absolute engine under the hood of this entire report. If you understand cognitive load theory, you understand why this math crisis is happening. And the bottleneck is something called working memory.
Which we need to clarify is very different from long-term memory.
Completely different. Think of your working memory like a very small sticky note in your brain. It's a temporary scratch pad. Humans can only hold about 4 to 7 new items on that sticky note at any one time.
4 to 7 items, that seems dangerously low for a functioning human.
It is low.
Right.
And it's a hard biological limit. It doesn't matter how smart you are. And this is where the difference between a novice and an expert becomes so critical. If I write 3 plus 4 equals 7 on a whiteboard, what do you see?
I just see one math fact. 3 plus 4 is 7. It's completely instantaneous for me.
Right, because you are an expert at basic addition. You have chunked that information into one single item on your mental sticky note. But a first grader does not see one item.
They see all the individual parts.
Exactly. They see the number 3, that's item 1. They see the plus sign, and they have to search their memory for what that operation actually means. That's item 2. They see the 4, item 3. The equal sign is item 4, and the concept of 7 is item 5.
So their sticky note is basically full just from looking at one simple equation.
Yes, their working memory is completely maxed out just processing the symbol. So if you then ask that same student to apply that equation to a complex word problem, if Johnny has 3 apples and gets 4 more, you've overloaded their system. The sticky note is full. Learning physically stops.
They literally cannot process the new information because they're
Yeah.
spending all their brain power holding on to the old information.
Precisely. And this totally reframes why speed is such a controversial but important topic in the report. I know practically everyone has some vivid trauma from timed multiplication tests.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
The mad minute. Just sheer panic, sweaty palms racing the clock. I despised it.
A lot of people have that exact trauma. And because of that collective anxiety, the educational pendulum swung really hard away from time tests. You will hear a lot of educators today say, I don't care how fast my students are, as long as they deeply understand the concept.
Which, to be fair, sounds really nice. It sounds supportive and compassionate, like we're prioritizing deep learning over just rote memorization.
It does sound compassionate. But the report argues it is actively crippling these students' future learning. Because fluency, which is defined as speed and accuracy, is the only proven way to clear off that mental sticky note.
So you're saying speed isn't about rushing, it's about efficiency.
It's about automaticity. If you have to use your precious working memory to manually calculate 7 times 8, you've is sitting inside of. You're using all your mental RAM on background processes.
You're stuck staring at the bricks so you can't see the building.
That's a perfect analogy. And the report has a data point that really drives this home. Speed plus accuracy is 2 times more predictive of future math proficiency than accuracy alone.
Wait, let me process that. Being fast is more predictive than just getting the right answer.
Speed plus accuracy. Let's say 2 students both score 100% on a math test. Student A finishes in 20 minutes. Student B grinds it out and takes an hour. We tend to think they both mastered the material because they both got A's.
Right, the gradebook treats them as identical.
But student B is suffering from what the report brilliantly calls the illusion of mastery. They were manually processing every single step. They were redlining their cognitive engine just to get that A.
And that kind of effort just isn't sustainable long term.
Not at all. Next year, when the math gets significantly more complex, student A is going to be fine because those facts are safely stored in long-term memory. Student B is going to hit a massive wall because they don't have the cognitive bandwidth to handle the new layers of information.
That perfectly explains the fifth grade cliff so many parents talk about. Their kid was doing fine, getting good grades, and then suddenly overnight, they're failing.
Because they were just surviving, not thriving. They were using working memory for foundational things that should have been fully automatic years ago.
Okay, so if we accept that overloading working memory is the core problem, how do we actually fix the way we teach? The EAB report outlines a solution called the instructional hierarchy.
Yes, and it's a framework that breaks learning down into three distinct, non-negotiable stages. The core argument is that you strictly cannot skip a stage.
Walk us through those three stages.
Stage one is acquisition. The only goal here is accuracy. Can the student do it right? This is where the explicit teacher-led instruction is vital. You need clear modeling.
Yeah.
And crucially, you do not time this stage. You just want them to get the right answer without pressure.
That makes total sense. Get the mechanics down first. What's stage two?
Stage two is fluency. And this is the one our current system usually skips or completely mishandles. The goal here is efficiency and speed. This requires frequent, timed practice.
But wait, you just agreed that timed practice causes panic and anxiety?
Timed practice causes anxiety if you do it during the acquisition phase. If I put a stopwatch on you for a skill you don't even know how to do yet, that is torture. That creates the math anxiety.
Ah, okay, I see the difference.
But if I time you on a skill you already know how to do just to help you get faster at it, that's gamification. It's like a track athlete timing their sprints. They already know how to run. They are just training to get faster.
That is a massive distinction. So timing itself isn't the enemy, bad timing is the enemy.
Exactly. And once they have fluency, you move to stage three, which is generalization. This is where we apply the automated skill to new, weird, unstructured problems. This is the word problems, the critical thinking, the fun part of math.
But the report implies we usually try to jump to stage three way too fast.
Constantly. A teacher will introduce a new concept on Monday, which is acquisition, and by Wednesday they are handing out complex application problems for generalization. They completely skipped the fluency phase. They didn't let the cement dry before they started framing the second floor.
So the students end up cognitively overloaded, and the teacher gets frustrated because the kids, quote unquote, just aren't getting it.
Right. And then what happens? We blame the student's natural aptitude instead of looking at the flawed instructional sequence.
Okay, so we have the why, which is cognitive load, and the what, which is the instructional hierarchy. Let's talk about the how. Because knowing this research is one thing, but getting a massive school district to actually change their daily operations is another universe entirely.
It is. And the report is surprisingly critical of how schools currently handle math interventions. It uses a phrase I had never heard before, but it's brilliant. It calls it admiring the problem.
Oh man, that is a brutal phrase, admiring the problem.
It really hits hard. It refers to the reality that schools are absolutely swimming in data. 80 to 90% of districts use universal screeners. They have the spreadsheets. They know exactly which students are failing. They just admire the data.
Because having the data isn't the same as acting on it.
Right. Often the quote-unquote intervention is just an administrator telling a teacher, hey, I'm looking at this spreadsheet and Johnny is behind in math. Please fix it.
And that teacher has 30 other kids in the room, a massive pacing guide to get through, and 0 extra time to figure out a custom plan for Johnny.
Exactly. So the teacher tries their best, but it's entirely ad hoc. The report argues that districts need to hardwire intervention. We need to automate the decision-making process so it isn't an impossible burden on the classroom teacher.
They provided a really specific case study on this too. A district in New York, Coxsackie Athens Central School District. What did they do differently?
They implemented a highly structured system called Spring Math. And the brand of the software isn't what matters, it's the methodology. They implemented a class-wide intervention that took exactly 15 minutes a day.
15 minutes a day doesn't sound like nearly enough time to reverse a massive proficiency gap.
It is more than enough if you are targeting the exact right bottleneck. They weren't reteaching a whole conceptual lesson for 15 minutes. They were doing highly targeted fluency practice. The system diagnosed the class and told the teachers, hey, your room is stuck on stage 2 of multiplication. Do this specific paired drill for 15 minutes.
So it completely removed the guesswork for the teacher.
Yes. They systematically answered 4 essential questions. What specific skill is missing? What is the fastest way to fix it? Is the fix actually working? And what do we do next? Advance, intensify, or exit?
And the results for Coxsackie Athens.
They saw meaningful, significant jumps in proficiency in just one single year, simply because they stopped treating every struggling student as a unique mystery that the teacher had to solve from scratch. They systematized the solution.
This theme of supporting the teachers keeps coming up in the research, and I was honestly pretty shocked by this next part. The report suggests that many elementary school teachers might not actually have a deep grasp of the math they're supposed to be teaching.
It's a very sensitive topic, but if we're doing a deep dive, we have to look at the training pipeline. The report highlights that only 15% of undergraduate programs for elementary education provide sufficient coursework in math content.
Just 15%. So the vast majority of our elementary teachers are stepping into a classroom with maybe one, possibly two math classes under their belt from college.
Correct. And let's be honest about human nature. Many elementary teachers chose that specific career path because they are deeply passionate about early literacy or child psychology. They didn't choose it because they love advanced mathematics. Many of them carry their own math anxiety from when they were kids.
And there's this split at the university level too, right?
Yes, the professors training them are totally divided. Only 51% of undergrad professors believe in mastering basic facts first. The other half prioritize jumping straight into complex real-world problems.
Skipping the hierarchy again.
Exactly. So these new teachers graduate, they get into their new classroom, they realize they need help teaching a math concept, they open the district-provided textbook.
And then the textbook fails them too. This was another massive bombshell in the EAB report. They looked at the most widely used core math textbooks and found they severely lack the explicit instruction we've been talking about.
The data is wild. One study they cited showed that only 17% of second-grade lessons in standard core text actually contained systematic, explicit instruction. By fourth grade, it dropped to just 8%.
Wait, 8%? So the textbook itself is skipping the acquisition phase.
It is heavily leaning into inquiry and discovery. So imagine the situation. You have a teacher who might already be a little shaky on the core math concepts, relying on a textbook that is incredibly vague on actual instruction. What are they supposed to do?
They go straight to the internet. They go to Google.
They go to Pinterest. They go to sites like Teachers Pay Teachers. They start frantically scavenging for random worksheets to fill the instructional gaps.
I have absolutely seen this. The highly decorated, visually cute math worksheets that don't really teach anything.
It turns the curriculum into the Wild West. You end up with total inconsistency. One third-grade classroom is doing rigorous fluency drills, and the third-grade classroom next door is doing an art project loosely related to fractions.
It really feels incredibly unfair to point the finger at teachers when the entire system is handing them broken tools and insufficient undergraduate training.
It is completely unfair. Teachers are working incredibly hard, but they're swimming upstream against bad cognitive science. That's why the report heavily highlights something called the Kansas Math Project as a potential roadmap out of this mess.
I love that a major innovation here is coming out of Kansas. What exactly are they getting right?
They took a totally different approach. They didn't just buy a new shiny textbook and cross their fingers. It's a state-funded initiative that focuses on modular training, specifically teaching educators the science of learning. They teach them the instructional hierarchy we just went over.
So they are teaching the teachers how the human brain actually processes and retains math.
Yes, and that totally empowers the teacher. It allows them to look at their flawed textbook and say, wait a minute, this lesson jumps straight from A to C. I need to physically insert a fluency module right here before we move on. It turns the teacher into a diagnostic expert.
Instead of just a content delivery system reading from a manual.
Exactly.
It sounds like it essentially gives teachers permission to stop rushing through the pacing guide.
That is the ultimate key. It gives them permission to slow down, permission to prioritize absolute fluency, and permission to ensure true mastery before they move on to generalization.
So let's zoom out and try to synthesize all of this for you listening, because we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We are looking at a crisis where nearly half or over half of our students are falling behind in a fundamental life skill. But the core argument of this EAB report is that this isn't some unsolvable mystery. It is a structural mismatch.
It's a profound mismatch. We are actively ignoring the strict biological limits of human working memory. We are skipping the fluency phase because the education world misunderstood what deep understanding actually looks like. And we are systematically failing to provide our teachers with the proper data, training, and tools they need to intervene effectively.
And the ultimate solution they propose is to respect the hierarchy. Accuracy first, then speed and fluency, and only then application.
Right. We have to call a truce in the math wars. Explicit instruction and student-led discovery both have a crucial place in the classroom, but they have to be deployed in the correct chronological order. You simply cannot discover what you cannot remember.
There is a really heavy equity angle to all of this that we touched on right at the start, and I want to make sure we circle back to it before we wrap up. Because math really acts as a gatekeeper in our society.
It is the ultimate gatekeeper. It's the whole so what of this entire deep dive. If a student falls behind in, say, fourth grade, simply because they never automated their multiplication tables, they don't just get bad grades for a semester. They start to deeply internalize the identity that they just can't do math.
And that identity shuts major doors for the rest of their life.
It shuts the door to advanced science classes in high school,
Hmm.
which then shuts the door to STEM majors in college, which shuts the door to some of the highest paying, most stable careers in the modern economy. And as we mentioned earlier, it even shuts the door to being an informed patient in a doctor's office when looking at statistics or understanding a predatory loan agreement.
It effectively creates a permanent underclass of citizens who cannot interpret the numerical data that governs their daily lives.
Exactly. And if we know exactly how to fix it, if the cognitive science of working memory is this clear, then allowing this system to continue is an act of choice. We are actively choosing to let that proficiency gap widen.
That is a very sobering thought. I want to leave everyone with a final provocation today, really leaning on that 93% statistic we opened with.
Go for it.
If 93% of human brains are biologically capable of learning this material, but our current system is failing around 60% of them, we have to stop asking what is wrong with these students.
And we have to urgently start asking what is wrong with the way we are presenting the material.
Exactly. If you're a parent listening to this, take a close look at your kids' math homework tonight. Are they being asked to run a conceptual marathon before they even know how to walk? Are they crying over a word problem simply because they can't do the basic subtraction fast enough to free up their working memory?
And if you're an educator or a district administrator, are you giving your teachers the time and the diagnostic tools to build that fluency? Or are you just demanding that they cover the pacing guide no matter what?
And maybe the biggest question, are we brave enough to bring back a little bit of timed practice if it means freeing up the brain for the truly big ideas later on?
It really might be time to make peace with the mad minute.
Some great questions worth exploring on your own. Thank you for walking us through the cognitive science and the numbers today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you all on the next deep dive.